For 15 years, an entire species of human existed only as letters on a computer screen. We knew their genes. We knew they had children with our ancestors. We knew their DNA was still alive inside millions of people walking the earth today. But we had never, ever seen their face. They had no chin we could draw, no skin color we could imagine, no eyes we could meet, an entire branch of humanity, completely invisible, until scientists scraped less than 0.5 milligram of fossilized plaque off a single ancient tooth. And what they found inside that microscopic sample is rewriting the entire human family tree from scratch. The skull that holds this secret spent 85 years hidden at the bottom of an abandoned well, dropped there by a man who knew somehow that what he was holding in his hands was not supposed to be found. And what scientists are realizing right now in 2026 is that this discovery may be only the beginning. Because if they are correct about what this skull really is, then there are more of them out there, sitting in museum drawers, buried in jungles, hiding in caves no one has thought to look inside. This is the strangest archaeological breakthrough of our time. And to understand it, we have to start with one secret, buried, quite literally, for nearly a century. In 1933, in northeastern China, a local laborer was working on a bridge across the Songhua River. The country was under foreign occupation. The man pulled a heavy, perfectly preserved human skull out of the riverbank. He recognized immediately that it was something extraordinary, and he understood without being told that the soldiers watching him work must never know what he had just found. So he wrapped it in cloth, carried it home in silence, and dropped it into the bottom of an abandoned family well. And then he did something remarkable. He told no one, not his wife, not his neighbors, not his children. The skull stayed in that well as wars came and went, as governments rose and fell, as 3 generations of his family lived above it without ever knowing what was buried beneath their feet. And then, on his deathbed, an old man finally whispered the secret to his grandson. What that grandson pulled out of the well would force scientists to redraw the map of human evolution, because hidden inside that skull was a face that had been missing from human history for over 140,000 years. For decades, scientists had been chasing a ghost. They knew the species existed. They had read its genes. They had even found tiny fragments of its bones scattered across Asia. But no one, anywhere on Earth, had ever seen its face. And what the DNA finally revealed is so unexpected that some researchers are still refusing to believe it. To understand why this matters, we have to go back to a different cave, on the other side of Asia. Some years ago, in a remote cavern in southern Siberia called Denisova Cave, a team of geneticists extracted DNA from a tiny pinky finger bone. The bone was so small it could fit on the tip of your thumb. They expected to find Neanderthal DNA. They found something else entirely. The genetic code inside that fragment did not match modern humans, did not match Neanderthals, and did not match any species ever recorded in the fossil record. It was a third kind of human, an unknown branch of our family. Hiding for tens of thousands of years inside a single finger bone, they named them Denisovans after the cave where they were first found. And then the mystery deepened, because as scientists tested modern human populations around the world, they discovered something deeply unsettling. The Denisovans had not simply gone extinct. They were still here, inside us. People living today in Papua New Guinea and Aboriginal Australia carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA in their genomes. A small group in the Philippines, the Aita Magbukon, carries close to 5%, the highest concentration of Denisovan ancestry on Earth. Tibetan mountaineers who climb above 4,000 meters without altitude sickness owe that ability to a single gene inherited from this lost species. And a recent study has now confirmed something even more astonishing. A Denisovan gene known as MUC19, which controls saliva and immune defense, is carried today by roughly 1 in 3 people of Mexican and indigenous American ancestry, inherited from a species that supposedly disappeared 30,000 years ago. So we knew their genes were inside us. We knew they had crossed continents. We knew they had children with our ancestors, and that those children's descendants are walking among us right now. But we had no idea what they looked like. For 15 years, this was the most haunting open question in human evolution. An entire species, invisible, a face that existed only as letters in a database. And then, that old skull came out of the well. The skull was donated to a paleontologist named Qiang Ji at Hebei GEO University in China. The first measurements were staggering. The cranium was 23 centimeters long, the longest human skull ever recorded of any species. The brain inside it had been roughly 1,420 cubic centimeters, fully within the range of modern humans and Neanderthals. The face was wide and low. The brow ridges were enormous. A single massive molar still clung to the upper jaw, almost identical in size to teeth previously found in Denisova Cave. The team gave the skull a name. They called it Homo Longi, the Dragon Man, after the Black Dragon River that flows through the region where it was found, but naming it was not the same as identifying it. The team suspected it might be a Denisovan. They could not prove it. The only way to prove it was DNA, and the skull, now nearly 150,000 years old, did not want to give it up. The case was handed to one of the most respected ancient DNA scientists in the world, Xiao Meifu of the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing. She had a deeply personal connection to this mystery. Years earlier, as a young graduate student in Svante Pääbo's lab in Germany, she had been part of the original team that first sequenced Denisovan DNA from the pinky bone. The mystery had defined her entire career, and now the skull that might finally solve it had landed on her desk. She started where every paleogeneticist starts, the petrous bone, a dense piece of the inner ear that preserves DNA better than almost any other part of the human body. She extracted, she sequenced, she got nothing. She moved to the tooth, she drilled into the enamel, she sequenced, and again, nothing. The standard methods were failing. The skull was too old, too weathered, too contaminated by decades of being handled by collectors and researchers. The DNA was simply gone. Most scientists would have stopped here. Fu did not. She tried something almost no one had ever attempted on a hominin skull this old. She turned to the dental calculus, the hardened fossilized plaque crusted onto the surface of the tooth. Essentially, petrified ancient bad breath. She scraped just 0.3 milligrams of it, less than the weight of a single grain of sand, and inside that microscopic sample, she found something no one expected to survive. The results, when they came in, were extraordinary. 2 papers, published simultaneously in the journals Cell and Science, 95 ancient proteins recovered, 122 single amino acid polymorphisms identified, 3 Denisovan-specific protein variants, 27 gene variants found only in previously known Denisovan individuals, and then the mitochondrial DNA, a direct, undeniable match to the Denisovan lineage from the cave in Siberia, over 3,000 kilometers away. The Dragon Man was a Denisovan. After 15 years of searching, humanity finally had a face. But here's where the story takes a turn that most documentaries leave out. Because not everyone is convinced. One of the loudest skeptics is a man named Sijun Ni, a paleoanthropologist at the same Chinese institute. The strange part is, Sijun Ni is the original scientist who described the skull as Homo longi years before. He is one of the people who has handled this fossil more than almost anyone alive. And he is publicly questioning whether the DNA is real. His concern is contamination. Dental calculus, he points out, sits on the surface of the tooth. It has been touched, brushed, and breathed on by dozens of researchers, collectors, and museum technicians over the decades. He told National Geographic, with a kind of dark humor, that the DNA Fu's team recovered might actually have come from him, from his own skin cells deposited on the skull during years of handling. Roughly 80% of the human DNA Fu's team recovered was modern contamination. The verdict rests on the small fraction that carried the chemical signatures of genuine ancient damage. This is the part the headlines did not emphasize. We do not yet have nuclear DNA from the Dragon Man. We have mitochondrial DNA passed down only through the maternal line. We have proteins. We have strong but not absolute evidence. Most experts believe Fu is correct. Benzi Viola of the University of Toronto called the evidence convincing. Frida Welker of the Globe Institute in Copenhagen said the protein signatures are unlikely to come from anything other than a Denisovan. Chris Stringer at the Natural History Museum in London called it the most complete Denisovan fossil ever found. But the doubt is real, and it is part of what makes this discovery feel so alive, so unfinished, so unlike anything you read in a textbook. And then the story expanded again. A separate team in Copenhagen confirmed that an old jawbone dredged up from the seafloor between Taiwan and mainland China. A fossil called Penghu 1 was also a Denisovan, a male who had walked along a coastline that no longer exists in a humid subtropical world that has since vanished beneath the ocean. Then came another bombshell. Chris Stringer and Sijun Ni published a new analysis of a million-year-old crushed skull from Yunxian, China, originally excavated decades ago. After painstaking digital reconstruction, the skull turned out to belong to the same lineage as the Dragon Man, which means the Denisovan family tree, and our own, did not split a few 100,000 years ago, as textbooks have taught for decades. The split happened over 1 million years ago. Stringer himself admitted, this changes a lot of thinking. And then a preprint dropped that may be the most stunning of them all. A team, led by Stefan Pereira at the Max Planck Institute, announced they had sequenced the genome of a Denisovan tooth from Denisova Cave, estimated to be 200,000 years old, the oldest high-quality human genome ever extracted, 80,000 years older than the previous record. And one of its most striking features was that the molar's outline closely resembled the molar still embedded in the dragon man's jaw. The pieces were locking together. Suddenly, fossils that had defied classification for decades started making sense. The Dali skull, the Jinyoshen remains, the Hualong specimens, the mysterious Sujiayao fragments, skulls that scientists had argued about for half a century, calling them Homo erectus, archaic Homo sapiens, or indeterminate, were now being reconsidered as members of the lost lineage. An entire shadow population of humans had been hiding inside the fossil record the whole time, misidentified, mislabeled, forgotten. And there is one more part of the story that should change the way you think about your own body. Some years ago at Denisova Cave, researchers found something that, by all rights, should not exist. A long bone fragment from a young teenage girl who had died around 90,000 years ago. They nicknamed her Denny. When they sequenced her DNA, they discovered that her mother was a Neanderthal, and her father was a Denisovan, a first-generation hybrid, the only one ever found. Two species that we used to think were rivals, even enemies, had children together, and those children had children, and those children's descendants are walking around today in offices and on subways and in living rooms on every continent on Earth. You might be one of them. Because here is the strangest, most haunting truth in all of this. The Denisovans did not entirely die out. They were absorbed. Their genes survived inside our species. Their immune system genes still help fight infections in modern humans. Their saliva proteins still protect indigenous American populations from disease. Their high-altitude adaptation still allows Tibetan climbers to live where the air should not let them survive. The Dragon Man's lineage did not vanish from the Earth 30,000 years ago. It just changed its address as it moved into us. So how does the story end? It doesn't, and that's the part nobody's willing to say out loud yet. Because if you connect every piece on the table, the fact that fossils across Asia have been misclassified for 50 years, the fact that we still don't have nuclear DNA from the Dragon Man, the fact that the calculus method just shattered every previous limit of ancient DNA, and the fact that genetic models keep predicting Denisovan-like populations that no fossil has ever confirmed. It points to one quiet, unsettling conclusion. There are more of them out there, right now, unidentified, sitting in museum drawers, buried in jungles in Indonesia and the Philippines, hidden in caves across southern China and India that no one has thought to test. Whole populations of lost humans waiting to be found. Some of them, perhaps, kinds of humans we don't even have names for yet. And given how fast this field is moving, the next one could be announced any day now. For 1 century, a single laborer in a Manchurian village kept a secret that nearly disappeared with him. For 15 years, a species existed only in DNA. For 146,000 years, a face waited at the bottom of a well. And the only reason any of this is known is because of a deathbed whisper, 0.5 milligram of fossilized plaque, and one scientist who refused to give up after every standard method had failed, which leaves us with one question worth sitting with. Most people who watch this far carry pieces of the Dragon Man inside their own bodies. Whether you live in London or Lahore, in Texas or Tokyo, fragments of a species that vanished from the Earth tens of thousands of years ago are still operating quietly inside your cells, your blood, your immune system. We are the last surviving evidence that they were ever here. Now think about that for a moment. If you carry their DNA, they were not lost. They are family. And families deserve to be remembered. So tell me in the comments below, when you first heard that you might be carrying genes from a species that disappeared from the Earth before written history began, what was the first thought that ran through your mind? Were you uncomfortable? Curious? Did you suddenly want to take a DNA test? Or did you find yourself wondering, like I did, how many more lost branches of the human family are still hiding inside us, waiting to be discovered? And one more thing. If you had been the laborer in 1933, holding a skull that did not belong to anyone you recognized as human, with soldiers watching you work, what would you have done? Would you have hidden it? Reported it? Thrown it back into the river? Let me know below. The most surprising answer wins a pinned reply. Until the next discovery surfaces from the dark, stay curious, because the past is not finished with us yet. Share.